somewhere around kilometer 30 of the Tokyo Marathon, when your legs have filed a formal complaint with your central nervous system, and your brain has started negotiating directly with your feet about whether finishing is truly necessary. A robot rolls up and offers you a tomato. A small, cold, refrigerated tomato, sourced from local Japanese farms, handed to you by a machine. This happened. This is a real thing that Japan built and deployed at a marathon, and apparently everyone involved considered to be a completely reasonable allocation of engineering resources. The country that invented the Shinkansen, that produces humanoid robots capable of holding conversations, that has automated hotel check-in desks and ramen vending machines and entire factory floors that run in the dark, because the robots don't need the lights on, that country decided that what runners most needed was a dedicated cold storage fruit dispenser on wheels. And the thing is, they were right. This is the story of the Tomato-Dispensing Robot. It is, on the surface, a light story, a fun story, a story for when you want to show someone something absurd about Japan and watch their face cycle through confusion, recognition, and then a kind of reluctant respect. But underneath the fun, it is actually a very precise story about what happens when a culture takes both hospitality and engineering seriously at the same time, and then points both at a problem that everyone else had decided didn't need solving. Let's start with the tomato. In most of the Western world, the tomato is a cooking ingredient. You put it in things. You slice it for salads. You crush it into sauce. You do not, as a general rule, pick up a tomato and eat it as a standalone snack the way you would an apple or a handful of grapes. The cultural framing of the tomato in Europe and the Americas is essentially, this requires further processing before we consider it food. Japan skipped that memo entirely. Small, sweet tomatoes, particularly the cherry and grape varieties that have been extensively developed in Japanese agriculture, are eaten in Japan as a snack, as a side dish, as a routine part of the meal that needs no additional context or preparation. They are sold in convenience stores in small cups for eating on the go. They appear in bento boxes not as garnish but as actual food. The cultural gap between Japan and the West on the question of the tomato's snack readiness is wider than you might expect, and the tomato robot makes no sense at all until you close that gap. Now, why a robot delivers them rather than a volunteer with a tray? The Tokyo Marathon, at its scale, deploys thousands of volunteers along the course. Aid stations are staffed by humans handing water cups and energy gels, and in a country with Japan's food culture, an impressive variety of other provisions: rice balls at some points, sports drinks, warm soup in the later kilometers of winter races. Human volunteers work. The tomato robot is not a replacement for them. It is something more interesting, a proof of the concept that robot-assisted refreshment delivery is viable, scalable, and here is the key: consistent in a way that humans are not. A human volunteer having a bad morning might be slightly slow, might miss a runner coming through, might not have the tomato positioned at exactly the right angle for easy handoff at speed. A robot with sensors and AI detection does not have bad mornings. It identifies the approaching runner, prepares the tomato, extends the mechanism, completes the transaction. Every time, 200 times an hour if necessary. 200 tomatoes per hour. This number exists because someone, an engineer, a product manager, a person who cared about tomato throughput as a measurable specification, calculated it, tested it, and included it in documentation about a robot. The existence of a tomato throughput rating is, philosophically, a lot to sit with. The robot made its debut at the 2019 Tokyo Marathon. The reported attribution places its origins with a team of engineers, whose design background gave them both the technical capability to build the system and, apparently, personal motivation to solve the snack problem. The origin story, as recorded, involves the designer experiencing a marathon personally, hitting the wall somewhere in the middle of the race, reaching an aid station, and finding the refreshment options inadequate. Most people having that experience eat a banana at the next station and file a mild complaint in their internal monologue. This person went home and engineered a solution. The solution arrived with a refrigeration unit. This detail is easy to skim past and should not be. The robot does not just carry tomatoes. It stores them at a controlled temperature in a built-in cooling compartment, so that when the tomato is presented to you at kilometer 30, it is cold. The thermal management of a marathon fruit handoff was a design requirement that someone specified and then built. The tomato you receive is not the temperature of the ambient air on the race course. It is the temperature that was decided, by engineers, to be optimal for a tomato consumed under conditions of extreme physical exertion. And the battery lasts 8 hours, which means the robot was designed to cover at minimum the full span of a marathon, from elite finishers to the last walkers coming through hours behind them, without requiring a recharge. The consideration went right down to the back-of-pack runner, who is still out there when everyone has gone home. This is Omotenashi, the Japanese concept of hospitality that does not wait for you to ask, that has already anticipated what you will need and arranged it before you knew you needed it. A cold tomato waiting for you at exactly the right moment, delivered by a machine with 8 hours of endurance, is not a gimmick. It is hospitality expressed through engineering at an unusually specific frequency. The robot runs on sensors and AI. It detects the approach of a runner and initiates the handoff sequence. It does not need to make eye contact, ask if you want a tomato, or manage the social complexity of a volunteer interaction during a moment when your ability to process conversation is severely impaired. You approach, the robot detects you, the tomato appears. Transaction complete, continue running. The robot can also be transported and reassembled at different locations. It is not fixed infrastructure, it is deployable. The tomato ferry, which is what runners apparently decided to call it, and which is a name that should coexist in the same sentence as AI sensor array, without anyone finding this strange, showed up at the Osaka Marathon. The Nagoya Marathon, a circuit of Japanese marathons, rolling in, setting up, dispensing chilled locally sourced tomatoes, and rolling out again. People started photographing it. This is the social media chapter of the story, and it requires a certain amount of analysis because the dynamic is interesting and not entirely obvious. Marathon runners at kilometer 30-something, exhausted, depleted, legs filing the aforementioned formal complaints with the nervous system, were stopping to photograph themselves receiving a tomato from a robot. Not just registering the moment in memory, taking out phones, composing shots, sharing them. The tomato became a social object. The interaction with the machine became an experience worth documenting. Part of this is the pure strangeness of it, the moment where you are 20 kilometers past comfortable, and a robot hands you a piece of produce, and the cognitive gap between expectation and reality is wide enough to produce the specific joy of the genuinely unexpected. Part of it is the Japanese context, where the robot is not a curiosity imported from science fiction, but a domestic production, an expression of local engineering culture that the runners recognize as belonging to them. And part of it is the tomato ferry branding, which whoever coined it deserves some recognition for, because calling a sensor-equipped refrigerated autonomous dispensing unit a ferry is an act of nomenclature that perfectly captures the quality of the experience. Something slightly magical, slightly absurd, definitely useful, and specifically Japanese. The internet, predictably, received this information and processed it through its standard framework for Japanese novelty. Most Japanese thing ever. Memes followed. Commentary followed. The specific genre of Western bewilderment at Japanese product engineering admiring, baffled, slightly jealous deployed itself in the comments sections of every article that covered the robot. Someone compared the robot's design to a giant tomato, which was either an intentional design choice by the engineers or a very good accident. Here is where the story gets genuinely interesting, rather than just charming. The tomato-dispensing robot is not the point of the tomato-dispensing robot. The tomato is not the point of the tomato-dispensing robot. The point is the AI detection and delivery system that can be tuned to dispense anything that can operate in any environment where humans approach a fixed point and require something handed to them. The sensor array that detects an approaching runner at kilometer 30 can detect an approaching patient at a hospital checkpoint. The robotic delivery mechanism that extends a tomato can extend a medication cup, a form, a specimen container, a meal tray. The 8-hour battery, the portable design, the AI-optimized timing, these are not specialized tomato delivery features. They are general-purpose service robot capabilities, iterated in a context where the stakes of failure are low enough that you can afford to prototype, and where the public-facing application is charming enough that people want to engage with it rather than fear it. Japan does this. It introduces robot interaction in contexts where the transaction is pleasant and low stakes: the hotel receptionist robot, the restaurant server robot, the tomato robot, and normalizes the experience before scaling it into higher stakes environments. You cannot walk a population into accepting robot-assisted healthcare without first giving them pleasant robot interactions to reduce the ambient anxiety about machines in service roles. You give them a tomato, they take a photo with the machine, they share it, they feel warmly about the machine. The next robot interaction is easier. The Tomato Fairy is, in this reading, a normalization project dressed as a marathon snack. One reported runner testimonial from the robot's deployment period describes receiving a tomato from the machine and finding it provided exactly the boost, physical and psychological, needed to keep going. This is a small story, and it is the entire story simultaneously. A person was exhausted. A machine gave her a cold tomato. She felt better and continued. The engineering worked, the hospitality worked, the tomato worked. The demand for locally sourced Japanese tomatoes is reported to have increased as a consequence of the robot's popularity, a supply chain effect of a robotic deployment that started a conversation about where the tomatoes came from and circled back to the farms that produced them. The farmers, in this reading, were inadvertent beneficiaries of a robotics project that turned their product into a social media object. The robot's design went on to inspire conversation about similar applications in other contexts. The claim that a banana-dispensing robot was developed in the United States in response is an unverified, but the fact that it is plausible, that the premise of robot-assisted marathon fruit delivery has spread far enough to generate international imitations, or at least the rumor of them, is itself a data point. The tomato opened a door. Let's close on the thing that makes this story more than a curiosity. Japan is a country facing specific demographic pressures that most other developed nations will eventually face, but that Japan is experiencing first and most acutely: a declining and aging population, a workforce that is shrinking relative to the service demands of its citizens, a care burden that will only increase as the country ages. The robot is Japan's answer to this. Not a single robot. The project of the robot, the cultural, governmental, and corporate commitment to building machines that can assist, support, and provide service in a world where there are not enough people to do it by hand. The tomato fairy is, in that frame, a small, cold, locally sourced data point in a very large argument. It is Japan telling the world, we can build a machine that detects you, anticipates your need, meets you where you are, hands you something useful, and does it 200 times an hour with an 8-hour battery. We chose to test this on tomatoes. We will not always be testing it on tomatoes. Somewhere right now, the tomato fairy is probably at a race. Sensors active, refrigeration running, battery at capacity. Waiting for someone to come around a corner at kilometer 30, with nothing left and everything still to do. The tomato will be cold. The machine will not miss. That's the most Japanese thing ever.